I want to set the table a little bit, so as we get into this, there's maybe a more clear understanding of what we're referring to. So to that end, you kind of mentioned pet play, and I'm wondering how that fits into or maybe falls apart in this model that we're building of, you know, age play at the top, and then CGL is like a part of that umbrella.
Sure. So pet play is definitely adjacent to age play in that many age players would call age play a headspace play. And so is being a pup or being a pony or so forth, things that have existed for a long time. In fact, at the Great Lakes Leather Alliance conference I think I first attended it in 2011 in Indianapolis. That conference was set up so that different organizations held a social in the atrium throughout the day, and they went ahead and had the pups and the littles hold a joint social, and it worked beautifully because there's a shared atmosphere of playfulness, of impulsiveness, inquisitiveness, curiosity, and you could either have, you know, dog bone shaped cookies or spiked lemonade or both. Though it's interesting to note from this story that there was also somebody dressed in a more BDSM dog style, you know, bigger, more leather, stuff like that, who had a harder time integrating into the little corralled area and interacting because the energy is so different. And I hate to keep using the term energy, but I'm going to keep using it because sometimes it's the best we have to go on. The sort of feeling this person creates and how it merges with others. And anyway, you're going to find a lot of overlap between animal players and age players, at least a noticeable overlap. And when you think about our experiences growing up in a certain era, you know, really these are just sort of things we were all exposed to as a cohort. Like pet play, definitely one of its watershed moments is the release of Disney's Robin Hood. I don't know how you're familiar with this, but this is a truth. And but that, you know, if you're a Disney viewer at the time and later in life you hold that sacred, you may well be an age player as well as a furry or pet player of some kind. But you could draw a distinction between being more of a dog or more of a puppy. And I think you also see that same sort of friendliness towards shared play that I mentioned at that conference earlier. So when I polled my age play group, we're about to have our next party. And I asked, well, would there be interest in sort of a pet play station? Like, what if I set up a medical table with some Band-Aids and, you know, stethoscope and maybe, I don't know, brushes? Like you pet people come up with what else should be there. But, you know, leave a white coat there. So whoever wants to put it on and do the exam and distribute the lollipop or dog treat can. And so these groups play very well together. You could very easily have a so-called baby doctor do the exam for a puppy. I mean, why not? They're certainly qualified. A fake doctor for a fake dog, in a sense, is perfectly okay. So beyond that, well, they may regress in different situations, you know, so that you could have your sort of pup corner where your pup collar is and your crate and so forth, if we imagine you're into those things, while the rest of your room is dominated by stuffies or something like that. It's there's no mutual exclusion here. These things play together as well as the individuals, you know?
Do they serve different needs, or are they just sort of the same thing in a different flavor, would you say?
You know, I bet you could draw some commonalities, but I also have to acknowledge that I am not a pet player and can't speak to like the puppy versus handler experience. That's one of the dynamic types that's out there for pup players, pup handler. Also, alpha is a top for a puppy sometimes. So that said, though, nobody grew up as a horse who is doing
Sure, there's a different type of imagination at work there.
Right, right. What they're doing is embodying what is an inescapably human conception of a horse,
Mm-hmm.
and further, a young horse, and what its mentality might be. Now, I've seen some pony players get very deep into their headspace, and it's really kind of moving. But age players, you know, we did all grow up as children, inescapably, and it's going to be different. You're going to need to be aware of your upbringing and how that influences you. I'm not saying certainly that all age play is born of childhood abuse. I'm not pathologizing the kink, but your family patterns, whatever they may be, if you were going to go digging for them and learn some things about yourself, age play is a hell of a way to do it.
Sure.
So that's one major difference between that and pony or pup play. You're likely to find whatever is lurking in your subconscious eventually with age play, and those things just aren't necessarily there, to my understanding, for a pup player. And oh gosh, I mean, the family dynamic, once you start learning about age play and studying, you know, human developmental psychology and things like that, you can start drawing some very interesting connections.
Sure.
It's a fascinating topic for me, but once you start talking about age play through the lens of psychology, again, it sounds a lot like you're pathologizing the kink, which I'm not, but just saying there's a much richer trove there if you're going to dig.
Yeah, we're talking about a like a non-clinical, community-derived form of expression, and we can come in with a like psychological understanding of the world, and maybe talk about internal family systems, or talk about like reparenting mechanisms, and start to apply some of these ideas. And there's a lot of value in that conversation, I think. But that's not to say that any of this implies a need in any kind of meaningful way, other than a need for self-expression, self-exploration, and maybe the same garden variety emotional needs for caregiving and caretaking that we all experience. If you are listening to this right now as you're jogging through the park, or however else you experience secular sexuality, I want to make sure you don't feel as if you need to catch all of this on the first try, or memorize all these acronyms and all this terminology. But I know that there's a lot of acronyms that people have probably seen floating around the web, and I think it might help to connect some of these ideas to identify what ABDL means, what DDLG or MDLB or some of these other ideas are, so people can get sort of a sense of what we're talking about.
Absolutely. And before I get into any acronyms or labels, I want to give the blanket statement that even if you don't find yourself among these, you are valid. If you feel you're an age player, if you have any experience that you connect to this stuff, you don't need anyone's permission to identify as an age player and use that as your lens to explore yourself. So yeah, we can go into acronyms. They can be useful as a quick shorthand. So a couple that you mentioned, DDLG, MDLB, well, those stand for Daddy Dom, little girl, and Mommy Dom, little boy. And, this is heartbreakingly heteronormative sounding,
sure,
but it doesn't matter who is in which role. If they feel they should be or could be or want to try that role, that also is valid. People of all genders and gender presentations can be mommies or daddies. So anyway, that said, it's important to reject a sort of visual pattern. When we talk about kink, when we talk about kink dynamics, when we talk about relationships, we have the slashy thing, like some initials on the left, a slash, some initials on the right. Don't stack those with the slash in the middle, like your sort of OCD would like you to, and infer that everything on the left goes with everything else on the left. So I really want to defeat and deconstruct this assumption folks might make, that because caregiver is on the left, like D in DS, that caregivers are necessarily dominant. They are not necessarily dominant. And if you say DDLG, well, I mean, you put Dom right in there, so I guess that daddy is dominant. But you could easily say DLG or CGL. I've been in age play relationships as a daddy who was not dominant in that relationship. It was collaborative. It was teamwork. It was a love language and having a great time together. But there's no dominance required to do that. These are a language of affection. They are roles. They are theater done for the benefit of the actors, not an audience. That's what someone called topping and bottoming. But I'll go ahead and apply it to this, knowing that I'm going to offend a tiny minority. Sorry. So anyway, so other helpful dynamics or ABDL is another one you mentioned, and that stands for adult baby / diaper lover. And this isn't even two people. This is describing one person. It's just two groups that are so easily and frequently lumped together that they have to share an acronym. But if your community is large enough, then yeah, you're going to have a DL clubhouse with no ABs, damn it, and an AB clubhouse, no DLs, damn it, because that's the nature of communities and their, tendency to create separation. And that's great to an extent, but it's also true DL and AB are different things. DL stands for diaper lover and AB stands for adult baby. And it is true that not all diaper fetishists are even age players, let alone adult baby or age players who express a very, very youthful persona. I remember going to my first ABDL event and being amazed at how quiet and chill it was, because everyone was on the floor, zoned out in the rug or in their toy with their pacifier in, just happily playing together or individually fairly quietly. And that was new for me, because I was used to louder, more expressive, more rambunctious, more what's the word, extemporaneous and impulsive people. So you're going to have different experiences with each group. They don't get an abbreviation, but middles deserve a little early explanation. So middles are hardest to program for if you're running a group, because littles are attracted to bright and colorful things, and their desires and the things they're into are very visible. They have fandoms. They like Nerf. They like Lego. They like Mario Kart. You can put out a warm wax station, and they'll enjoy doing BDSM play that to them feels like making a mess. So it's good fun. But middles, somebody who has an age play persona or space, but it's more teenage, well, they're subtler and harder to reach, just like a teenager.
Right.
If you have a middles party, they might all just shut the door and smoke weed and talk about boys. I guess I'm putting on a good party by leaving them alone and giving them a dark room full of glowy lights to do their thing in. Glowy lights are definitely a thing in age play. So anyway, middles really do suffer in all this categorization, because they can so easily exist as a middle outside of an age play community and outside of an age play space. They're more adult in their expression, so they may never even identify as an age player, because there's not enough difference to really make it clear that there's something going on. And that's actually I don't want to move too far from your question. Were there any other acronyms or categorizations you want to dive into real quick?
I mean, I want to spend all day kind of parsing out all of this. As a big sex nerd, that's very much like an occupational hazard of mine, because I'll start to explain a basic idea and be like, but if we break it down even further, but that being said, I'm going to let Sarah bring us to the phones here in just a moment. Before we do, though, I guess I just want to kind of set the table a little bit for the audience and figure out, like, what are we talking about here? I know it's not necessarily fair to ask you, like, is this a role play? Is this a relationship dynamic? Is this an isolated scene or a lifestyle? Because I know that the answer is kind of yes to all of those, but I'm hoping to understand better how some of these pieces might fit together.
Yeah, this is something that I often start my class with. My Age Play 101 class is normalizing the presence of age play in the US. Because even as a vanilla couple walking into it, I don't know if you've ever had an experience like this, but you know, early in your relationship, you haven't talked about sex a lot, yet somehow you're at a sex toy store together and you sort of separate and kind of awkwardly pick out something to sort of show to the other person, you know. I'm sorry to remind you of bad old days, but
right.
You know,
you've got like the feather to show them, and then you've got the actual toy behind your back just to see how the feather goes over. And if they're like kind of unimpressed by it, then you're like, actually.
Yes. So, you know, you can't go in there without seeing prominently schoolgirl outfits. It's just a massive presence in modern sexuality. This trope is inescapable. And if this vanilla couple buys one and goes home and does it, was it age play? And, you know, maybe to costumes are costumes, but what if they do a voice? You know, what if they really like it? It becomes a little difficult to say, like, when it's definitely age play, but we know we're on that road from the very beginning. And if the let's say the caregiver, you know, feels a little something extra during that spanking that is not just spanking, but maybe a glimmer of responsibility or something like that, you know, the caregiver mentality could start to assert itself in that person in such a scene. So I'm very cautious about calling age play role play. And that's because there's sort of an, you know, communities make internal hierarchies. And you can imagine that some age players would sort of poo-poo role players. And considering that's not the real thing. And I don't participate in this or support it because while you might feel it's always on for you, that this is your constant state and that you're always a little, and other people have a more temporary experience, or it comes and goes, or certain things stimulate it, or whatever. It's important to say that they are also valid age players. So you can paint your master bathroom pink and decorate it in a Hello Kitty theme, like I have, and put a ball pit in your guest room, like I have, to be a lifestyle age player. But there's no hierarchy. If someone goes into the ball pit, you know, are they doing age play? Well, that's a personal experience. I mean, maybe, but a lot of people get in my ball pit, you know. They're not all doing age play. So I want to say that age play is a wide net, and a whole set of experiences touch on it. So if you felt these feelings of maybe feeling a little small or a little extra vulnerable, or wishing you could show this dumb thing you've done since you were 10 to somebody, some kind of art, let's call it, and have them appreciate it and think you're cool for doing it. These are age play-like feelings. At its core, it is the bid for attention that underlies any healthy relationship. Bids for attention should be met at like an 80% rate to have a healthy relationship. So the age play dynamic is full of specialized bids for attention. You know, look at my coloring page and use your parenting skills to praise it, not criticize it, you know, is a classic bid for attention. So if you ever feel small or want someone to accept your vulnerability or just accept you as you are for a more childlike trait, that could suggest there's a little age play going on.
Got a little age play in you. I actually really love that answer and that idea of I feel like attention-seeking behavior is like such a pathologized type of term, but everybody in a relationship wants to express different parts of themselves, and this really sounds more like an emotional language, a different way of communicating care, affection, need, intimacy, vulnerability, desire, and I'm fascinated to get deeper into it.